Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be having a conversation of why you should not be so risk averse in your 20s. I genuinely find it so sad when I see people in their 20s being so scared to take a risk. Of course, our appetite to risk is factored by many different things that happens in our lives. However, if there is ever a good time to take a risk, it is definitely now, especially if you're in your 20s. And to be fair, if you're watching this video and you're not in your 20s, the same message still does apply. So, one of the reasons why I say taking your risk in your 20s is essential is because when you're in your 20s, for the average 20-year-old, you do not have as many responsibilities as you will when you're older. When I'm talking about responsibilities, I mean specifically things that will tie you down to a specific location or a place or a job. And these can be things such as having a high mortgage to pay off, having children, for instance. These are all responsibilities that we will inevitably have later in our lives, which can tie us down to a place. And for the average 20-year-old, you don't have any of this. So if you really wanted to pick up your bags and move to Greece tomorrow, you could pick up your bags and move to Greece tomorrow. There is not a lot holding you back. And I think it's important to acknowledge that you don't have a lot holding you back at the moment. So now is the time to be able to do those things. Moving on to point number 2. When you're in your 20s, I think we have a lot of time. It boils down to whether you think that life, we do have a lot of time because none of us know where the end is. But relatively, if we're assuming that we are invincible and we're all going to live past the age of 100, we have a lot of time. And I think it's important to know that you have time to be able to make mistakes and to be able to get up and correct those mistakes and essentially still make something of yourself. If we're looking at random markers of success, and the marker of success that most people use is the age at which people become millionaires. We know that it's very rare for somebody to be a millionaire in their 20s or even in their 30s. And this is testament to how you have so much time to be able to make a mistake and still make something so big of yourself. So if there's ever a time to make a mistake, again, it's now. Not a lot of people are looking at the mistakes that you're making because the honest truth is we're all making mistakes. I'm making mistakes, you're making mistakes. None of us have enough time to be focusing on each other's mistakes. And the great thing, kind of relating back to point number 1, is that our mistakes really and truly don't have a high cost. The worst case scenario for most people. Now, I want you to sit there and think about what is your worst case scenario. If you were to lose every single thing you had today, where would you go to? Where would you be? What would you be doing? And for me, when I thought about that, I ultimately boiled it down to I would probably have to go back to live with my parents. I probably would have to start out just doing a regular whatever job that I could find, let's say in McDonald's. And that would be my worst case scenario. And given that I have kind of just started my adulthood, that worst case scenario is not too long ago a life that I was living as a potential best case scenario. So this is why I say your worst case scenario is not as bad as it sounds most of the time. Now, of course, I know everyone's situation is different and some people's worst case scenarios might not be the same. One of the things that I think is that if you're sitting down and watching this video with a stable internet connection, probably in the Western world, your worst case scenario probably isn't as bad as you actually think. And then thirdly, the reason why I think it's so important to take risks in your 20s is because it would be such a shame if you just conform to the noise of life. If you just let life get in the way, you climbed up this corporate ladder that you had no intention on climbing, and you finally get to the top and you realize the view is not what you wanted to see. I think that is probably a lot worse than being the person in your 20s that tried a lot of things, realized it didn't work, had to go back to square one, and then eventually made something of yourself. And this is simply because I think life is too short. As much as I mentioned that we have a lot of time, but at the same time, life is too short for you to be doing things that you don't want to do, to be playing the games that you don't even want to win the prizes. I think it's important that you make sure that you're in the right arena to be able to win the right awards that you want to achieve. So if you've been looking for a sign, if you're looking for a sign to take a risk to travel the world, if you're looking for a sign to start that business, or if you're looking for a sign just to chat to that girl or guy that you've been wanting to chat to that you see on the bus every single day, this is the sign. In your 20s, now is not the time to be taking a risk. If you spend time around me, it gives me the ick. Like, I hate when people want to be so risk averse at such a young age. Like, These are the roaring 20s that people always talk about. What stories are you going to have when you grow older if you didn't take any risk in your 20s and you took a risk in your 40s and you lost everything and you went back to square one and you were never able to recover? However, if you took that risk in your 20s, you went traveling, you went to Japan, you bumped into the love of your life in Australia, you came back, you started your film studio in the UK, and essentially now you're bigger than Marvel. That is a story worth telling. So if you needed a sign, this is the sign.